All right, Brooke, how's it going today?
It's going well. I'm excited for our guest today. We've got a legend in the industry, an industry veteran, and that just means he's really, really old. But no, really, really excited about this next guest.
Yeah, no, we do have someone with a lot of experience. So, Lino, welcome. We appreciate having you here today to kind of talk about the mistakes that have made. We've been talking to a lot of different people so far, Brooke, and some people have been in the industry for a few years and they've shared their perspective. But Lino, I think you've been around for some time, which is a good thing here for sure, because we get to learn from all the experience, not just someone that's been doing it for 2 years and is somehow an expert. So, welcome. Would love to kind of give a little background on you, Lino, your background in the industry, and then kind of all the projects you have your hands in today, if you don't mind.
Outstanding. Well, typical Brooke, overselling. So I don't know that I use the word legend. Long in the tooth, perhaps would be a better starter there. But yeah, so I started my career in the vacation rental business July 4th weekend of 1996. So we'll do the math on that. I started with a company called Abbott Resorts here in the Panhandle of Florida. I'm in the Destin market. I hate to call them a mom and pop because back then I think they had almost 2,000 properties across the Panama City to Perdido Key, Pensacola. And about a year into my beginning, year and a half into my beginning with them, they sold to form what became Resort Quest, the IPO for Resort Quest. So I went up through the positions in Resort Quest and left for just a brief period in 2006, and then came back with a group in 2007 that bought Resort Quest from Gaylord Entertainment Company. And we with the goal to revamp the business, get back to the basics, get sort of clean out the corporate sort of mentality and everything that didn't positively impact an owner, a guest, or the culture. So we cleaned that up and then sold it to Wyndham in 2010 to create Wyndham Vacation Rentals North America, which we then sold to Vacasa in 2019. I made the decision at that point to just before the sale closed to not make the turn, not for any other reason other than it was time for me to focus on some of my personal goals and projects, and sort of reinvigorate myself. I told my wife, probably a little fib, but told her my plan was to step back a little bit. In 2019, I failed miserably at that. Ended up launching Scenic Stays, which is our rental real estate property management company here in the Panhandle. We're just shy of 400 properties today and growing. We have I'm a partner and the president of BeHome 24/7 Technologies. I was actually their largest customer for about 10 years and helped to develop a lot of the workflows and functionality that were built to solve my operational headaches into one platform. And then about 2.5 years ago, we launched OK to Charge, which is the industry's first branded EV solution. And so your guests who drive EVs no longer have to have their car down the street at a bar while their friends and family are in the pool or on the beach, right there at the vacation rental. So it's a little of my background. Excited to be here with you guys today, and I want to thank Brooke for the concept in general. To me, when you first asked for my top 10, I was like, holy cow, how can I narrow it down to just 10? Because you learn so much along the way by not doing the right thing or things that you should have in hindsight's clearly that 2020 view. But so thank you, Brooke and Conrad, for putting this together. As I looked at everybody else's comments and their own top 10 list, I didn't feel so bad about myself. There's a lot of people made the same mistakes, which
There's
was
a lot of parallels in there for sure. In there,
yeah.
Yeah, there's some repeats, but I like your list, because there's some new stuff in here too. That certainly we haven't touched on, or we haven't touched on in detail. So it's good to get your perspective on that. So if you're cool with it, we're going to dive right in. So number one, don't underestimate the importance of proactive communication to owners, even when it's bad news. So I feel like the thing that I see a lot, Lino, and the clients that we work with is that they tend to avoid the owners maybe a little bit. Oh, here's your statement. Hey, the checks are coming in, right? No problem. But this kind of takes a different tilt to it, right? Communicate with the owners, and then the last piece, right? Especially when it's bad news. What's kind of your experience here with dealing with the owner? How do you keep them happy, and how do you communicate with them in a healthy way on both sides?
Yeah, well, it's got to be open and honest, at all times. I mean, when I think about the owner relationship, they have hired us to be their eyes and ears for one of the most expensive assets that they may ever own. Many of our owners need the good rental revenues to actually afford some of these properties. So it's really important that we focus on our job and communicate good, bad, and ugly. I see a lot of communication from companies going to owners, and they're touting all positivity, right? How high the ADRs were back in 21, end of 2020 into 21, 22. And I told our team at Scenic, you better start preaching that these are not the reality to come, that this is artificial prop up. Yes, we're going to enjoy the ride as well, but we're going to come back down to earth. That's just one example of not overinflating your successes so that you don't have to walk back when things change, because then owners are going to call you, what the heck's happening, man? I got 500 a night for this one bedroom unit, the last couple of years. What are you guys doing differently? Well, as I told you, these are artificially inflated ADRs because Florida was one of the only states open, and so everything's going to come back down to normal at some point. So if you're communicating the right thing in a timely manner with honesty and integrity, I don't think that could ever hurt your relationship with your owners.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious too, just what methodologies or what ways are you communicating that with an owner? Is an email fine? Do you need to be calling the owners all the time when you're doing that kind of thing? Is it okay to do one-to-many communication? Like, could you write one newsletter and then send it out to 100 owners? I'm curious your perspective on that too.
Yeah, so it really depends on the owner. Some owners, and it depends on the profile of the owner. If they're investors, they just want the statement and the check, and if something has to be replaced, they want to know about that. So I would say knowing your owners includes knowing how they like to be communicated to and with what frequency. And so I think it's a very individual thing from owner to owner. I'd probably leave the communication side there. But we get storms in Florida, obviously, hurricanes, and we do mass communications around hurricanes. We manage several HOAs. And so we do mass communications to HOAs in preparation for storms, these kind of things. You'd be surprised at how many owners of other rental companies comment that, gosh, we haven't even heard from our own rental company, and you guys are sending something out saying, please, that your patio furniture has been pulled in and things are secure. And nobody from my own company has even called me about a storm in the Gulf, kind of thing. So again, we're the eyes and ears of the owners, and it ought to be a good, solid relationship.
Mm-hmm. Brooke, I don't know if we've talked about this one too much. It's maybe come up in passing, but I don't know if we've had really a detailed number on it. I thought it was a great one to start with, though, wasn't it?
No, it was great. I mean, there's a reason why I think Lino did it number one, but there was a couple people, Lino, that echoed your same comments here. I mean, the first was, and it seems like we always reference him because his top 10 list was so good. But Jason Sprinkle, he said, you can never have enough owner communication. You build trust and relationships with open, honest, transparent, and frequent communications. There's very little that can't be cured with great owner communication, which I thought was so good. And then Tom Goodwin with Mount Laurel Chalets said, in the hustle bustle of running a busy company, I've not always put enough emphasis on proactively and regularly communicating with homeowners. And then I just always like this one. This is just more general, but Adam Norris said, forgetting that a phone call trumps emails every time for difficult situations. So, and I think a couple of people have said that, and that's like kind of a rule I always have within our team. I'm like, look, if you go back and forth 3 times on an email, pick up the damn phone and just call.
Yeah,
so important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, let's turn the page to number 2. So number 2, growing the skill set of your team is as important as your inventory. So I like that because there's a lot of inventory overlap conversation that we typically have here. So tell me about that. How do you kind of grow the skill set of your team? Is it training? Is it just investing in courses like material? Is it the team doing it? I guess I'm just curious how you do that functionally.
Yeah, so finding the right people is key, right? You got to get the right people on your team. Typically, I look for people better at certain areas of responsibility than myself, or with a better attention span, because I'm not the type that's going to get down in the details and in weeds often enough. So finding the right people, but making sure that those people are in the right seat. And that's where early in my career, I did not spend enough time. I thought, we've got a job opening over here. Let me put somebody in it, and then we'll be successful. And that's not I didn't go far enough. And so getting the right person in the right seat is critically important. Equipping them for success, right? The tools, the training, the materials that they need to actually perform the responsibilities to your expectations is really that third step. And then for me, there's a fourth step. Get the hell out of their way. Once you've got the right person, you've set them in the right seat, you've trained them and equipped them for success, all you can do is screw them up or slow them down. And that's my personal belief. So letting people grow by making their own mistakes. One of my mentors, and she actually she's got a job with us at Scenic Stage, Joanne Sochet. She was my first. She was the director of operations at Abbott, and she told me a long time ago, Lino, give your people enough rope to be successful, but not enough to hang themselves. So stay involved, stay connected, but let them learn through their experiences, and I think that's key.
Yeah. In my own career, I've had a situation where I wasn't actually given the right tools. And it's actually the most frustrating thing when you have someone who's like actually trying to help and is dedicated and is doing the right thing, but they've got to like beg for the company credit card to like get the right tools to do their job. And it's just this like very frustrating feeling. So having been in that seat before, now I feel like I try to maybe over-index myself personally is like, oh, whatever tool you need, here you go. You can have it. Brooke, I don't know if we certainly talked a lot about people and hiring, but anything new here on this one that we could highlight with Lino's lessons?
No, I mean, yeah, obviously I feel this people comes up every single time, but I think this one is a little bit unique where it's talking about more so growing the skill set. And that's one of the kind of the core things that we do here at Vintory is we really want to nurture and develop our team and the leaders within our team, even if they take those skills somewhere else. So I'm all about developing the team. But, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but one of my favorite quotes was from actually, I think I started the book, was from Clark Twitty, the chapter on team. And it was from Clark Twitty. He says, "This business, as with so many others, remains very simply all about people. It contains a lot of other things, but everything is wrapped up in good people." And I thought that was a good quote for this mistake.
Yeah, I love that, Brooke. I'll share with you. I think it was Richard Branson that made the quote that it said, somebody asked him, what if you spent all this money on training and then they just left? He's like, what if I didn't train them and they stayed?
Yeah.
Good work, right? Yeah. And that happens a lot, Lino, though. I think that you see that a lot in companies where people aren't given new opportunities, and then it just leads to, kind of subpar performance. So I love that idea. That's a solid one. Well, let's turn the page a little bit. Number 3, the basics, quote unquote, basics are not differentiator. They're the basics. So rooms should be cleaned properly and your team should be nice and smile. Those seem like basics, Lino, but like my own personal experience leads me to think that some people can't even do the basics. So I guess maybe the question is, how do you nail the basics? And then how do you maybe get to the next stage of actually providing exceptional service beyond the basics?
Yeah. So for me, it's all about consistency, right? I see a lot of companies touting how great they are at housekeeping or how their maintenance or whatever their scores, in the surveys are, and those are all great and they're important KPIs, but they're not differentiators. A true differentiator is something that someone would pick you over somebody else for a reason. What is that reason? And for this one, it may sound a little out of the box, but I love to talk about Chick-fil-A. There's 2 chicken companies that come to mind, and I love fried chicken. You got KFC that's doing a little less than $1 million per store on average per year, right? And then you've got Chick-fil-A that I would argue is in the exact same business. They fry chicken, they've got potatoes, they've got sauce, they've got all these other things as well. And they're doing something like $12 million a year per store on average, and they're closed on Sundays. Why is that? Well, they look at their food not as a differentiator. It's should be hot, should be consistent, should be well prepared. The stores should be clean. The people should be nice. The parking lot should be clean. And those aren't differentiators for them. What is differentiators for Chick-fil-A is hospitality. They look at themselves not in the fast food business, but they look at themselves in the hospitality business. The food is the food, and it should be consistent. But their people make the difference. And when you focus on people, you, again, equip them well, give them good direction, but then let them do what they do best, creating a hospitality experience. Those of us in hospitality could learn from that.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'm always impressed about on the Chick-fil-A side of things is they get like a teenager with their first job to follow their standards. Like that's one thing that, I didn't see. I used to work at a grocery store when I was in high school, and we had all these rules. We went through this, presentation. Here's what you had to do, but then no one did it. Whereas like you were saying, enforcing those and like leadership doing the same thing, my pleasure, those kind of things, I think kind of carries people through. So yeah, Brooke, this one, I like this one. It's a bit different from some other ones that we've talked about, but how do you think about that from this side of differentiating versus delivering that service that people want?
No, I mean, first of all, I like this one because really, Lino, I don't think anybody else mentioned this. And I loved it. I actually chuckled when I read this the first time, and it brought me back immediately to one of my heroes, John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach. And he has a quote. He says, "I believe in the basics, attention to and perfection of tiny details that may be commonly overlooked. They may seem trivial, perhaps even laughable to those who don't understand, but they aren't. They're fundamental to your progress in basketball, business, and life. They're the difference between champions and near champions." And great metaphor or analogy there with Chick-fil-A, Lino.
That's strong. I love that, Brooke.
Yeah, basketball is all about fundamentals too. Imagine if the Celtics could have played perimeter defense this year, they would have been in the finals. Instead, they were sitting at home. So not that I'm salty about that. All right, we'll turn the page a little bit. So if it isn't in writing, number 4, if it is not in writing, it is not part of the deal. Document everything. It's not in bold, but I imagine, Lino, this wasn't bold when you sent it over. People did mention this one, but maybe you've got a story about a deal going wrong or having some issue. What can someone learn from this about documenting and writing things down?
Unfortunately, I probably have more than enough stories for this one. But at the end of the day, we get very excited about new things, right? Whether it's a new property that we're going to take over, a new real estate deal, a new owner joining the program. And we're so excited in that moment. We all have great intent. Well, when something goes bad, intent doesn't matter because it's only what's in ink that does. And I can't tell you the number of conversations that I've had with owners where one of myself or one of my team members signed a property and maybe didn't go far enough with responsibilities. Who's responsible for what? Carpeting, because it's, gets a kid spills a Kool-Aid or something on it. It becomes a company expense because we didn't add, life expectancies and who's responsible for guest damage and the like. So some of these were pretty expensive lessons early on. But I couldn't be clear enough on the documentation and setting the proper expectations on the front end so that you don't end up with an expensive problem, later.
Yeah. I feel like, Brooke, this one did come up quite a few times. And I guess it's when you're early in your business, when you're early in your career, you think, oh, I'm not that big, I don't need to do this. But maybe this is one you just have to learn the hard way. Is that the case? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we heard it time and time again. I mean, it jumps out like Steve Trover, I think, mentioned. He's like, everything needs to be in a contract and not done with a handshake. And then he added the few times he let it happen, it came back to bite hard. He said, get it in writing. And then James Mannings with Top Villa said he would make sure you get everything in writing from partners, suppliers, with clear documentation of agreements and policies. But probably one of my favorite was Steve Schwab with Costco. He says, it's said we see the world as a reflection of our own intentions. And one of the rookie mistakes I made early on was believing people would do the right thing in the absence of a good contract. I figured I could just trust people to keep their word because I kept mine. Yeah. So I thought those were pretty solid comments.
Yeah. A lot to learn from that. And maybe it is just one of those things people have to learn the hard way. But if they're listening, maybe we can prevent a little bit of future pain, hopefully, by people hearing that over and over again. All right. I like this one, number 6. So remember, without the owner's asset, you are not in business. So you have to side with them over the guest. Well, I like this a bit, Lino, because you're picking a side. Some people may not always feel this way. Sometimes, especially what I find in this kind of OTA driven world, they might want to maybe have a certain status on a popular short-term rental site, and they'll bend to the guest's will all the time. It sounds like you're kind of saying the other way around. The owner is the customer, and we want to take care of the guest, but we can't be beholden to them. What's kind of your perspective on this?
Yeah. So for me, and actually what really called this into light for me was several years ago. And Brooke, you just mentioned Steve Schwab with Costco. He actually got me thinking in a different way about this particular issue. Without an owner's asset, we don't even have a rental company. And so why would we ever side with somebody other than the owner when there is an issue between the guest and the property? And so, when I think about that relationship, it's a marriage, right? It is a marriage that needs good communication. It needs, support. And we're not always going to be right, but we're going to be in the middle and be the referee between the owner's asset and that guest. And we have to have clear expectations set for both sides. So maybe we're very clear in our rental agreement with the owner, but if we're not just as clear with the guest and that relationship of using that asset, then we've got work to do on that side of the equation.
Mm. Yeah, Brooke, I don't know if this exact one has come up. Certainly the owner relation piece, has kind of been obviously a topic that we've talked about so far, but I'm curious your perspective on this one, kind of quote unquote picking a side and that being the owner side.
No, I mean, here's the reality. Like Lino said, I mean, I say this all the time. Without inventory, you don't have a business. It's like having a grocery store with no food on the shelves. So, but also once you do have some inventory in there, and it may seem kind of counterintuitive, but sometimes you do need to decrease your inventory count, especially if you do have that owner that just isn't doing it for you. So, I mean, there's nothing worse than a toxic owner, right? Toxic owners will steal 10 times the energy from your team. And getting rid of them will help your bottom line. So don't hesitate to fire them. So the burnout isn't worth it to your team for sure. And I would actually argue prune annually. Definitely for a healthier, more productive team.
Yeah, Brooke,
I guess. Go ahead,
I'm
Lino.
sorry.
Yeah,
I think
please.
we skipped over number 5, but that actually ties in perfectly to that. Not every owner is a good fit for your company, even if their property is. And that really speaks to that, Brooke. We've got a policy at Scenic Stays. We're not going to do business with the jerks. I had to fire a doctor with 5 large homes. They were anywhere from 200,000 up in production each GLR. But he would literally call guests while they were in house and make derogatory comments about whether they were parked on the lawn or the trash can wasn't pulled in and alike. He actually called our team a few times and said, look, the rates are too low for this week. And we're like, for the guest that's actually in the house, we're not going to change the rate on a guest while they're in house. But literally it was ridiculous stuff like that, taking up way too much time. And we just parted ways, said, look, you'd be better off with one of our competitors, and I'll give you a few of their names.
we did skip number 5. My mistake on that. Sorry, guys. But I think to restate what that was, not every owner is a good fit for their company, for your company, even if their property is. I think you told the story perfectly there, Lino. That I imagine that was a tough pill to swallow, though. I mean, I assume at least 6 figures of revenue that you had to let walk out the door, but it sounds like it was causing a lot of pain and it wasn't worth that relationship. Yeah,
it wasn't worth it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, let me try to get back on track here. So number 6 was just repeat that. Remember the owner's asset. Without them, you're not in business. Let me go to number 7 then here. Vendors are an extension of your team. So treat them as such and share in the success. I like this one. I don't think we've had any vendor ones to date. So I'm a vendor on my side. Brooke's obviously a vendor on our side. So we love this. And you know what? I guess from my perspective, as you get into this one, Lino, the clients that treat us well and they call a little bit late or they have a little issue or there's a little hiccup, I want to help them too. Like when we have that good relationship versus the ones who kind of keep us at arm's distance. So I'd love to hear your story here. How do you treat a vendor the right way? And how do you get the best out of the vendor by being it more of a partnership and less of a transactional thing?
Well, it goes back to good communication, setting clear expectations, being consistent and the like. I do see vendors as an extension of our business and really a catalyst for our overall success. But you've got to manage them appropriately as well. There's got to be clear expectations set. But to me, they are a key to growing your business and having fewer problems within a particular segment. We happen to use Vintory for our business development, needs, and that's one of the areas that unfortunately we were doing kind of part-time and half-assed, and you really can't do business development successfully that way. And I think one of the reasons we're growing as rapidly as we are is because we are focused on it, and we brought in the right support and tools so that it becomes a passion project versus just something we think about and hope. Hope isn't a strategy. Growing your business, it needs strategies around it. So,
yeah, Brooke, we love the vendor love. Anything to add on to this one?
Yeah, I mean, so when I had Vantage, I mean, it's so often many of my competitors treated their vendors as like second-class citizens, and they really didn't respect them. And I always wanted to make sure I was nurturing and developing those relationships, because you are really, I mean, the vendors are a reflection of your company. They are part of your company. If they're out and about and they're cleaning your properties or doing, taking photos, I mean, they're a reflection of you. So I always made sure that whenever we had to pay our vendors, I actually kept the checks in my office, and I had them come up and meet with them, or I'd come down and meet with them in the conference room. And I wanted to hand deliver that check. I wanted to thank them for their business. I wanted to let them know that I appreciated them, because I also knew selfishly that they were a big source of referrals for us of new homeowners. And very often people don't look at it that way. And again, we get those, we would end up constantly getting referrals from cleaners and many other vendors within the space.
Yeah, I like that, because ultimately, like you said, it's if you treat them the right way, they're going to go, these guys are great, you should work with them. And that's obviously how a lot of inventory moves around, is how people are treated goes a long way. Let's head on over to number 8. So number 8, Lino here, every associate should be valued, but also bring value to your business. If they don't, it's time to review your org chart. So this kind of goes back a little bit to kind of that team building aspect, but kind of your experience here. How do they bring value? And then how do you maybe put them in a different seat if they're not bringing value, and keep them as a member of your team? I guess I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah, so I've struggled with this one because I'm a people person. I mean, I get my energy from external sources and people first, for me all the time, and it makes it a little more difficult for folks wired like myself to make, the right decision with bad news, right? And so it all comes down to respect for me. One of my mentors years ago said, Lino, there's 2 types of people. They're either going to make you money or they're going to cost you money. We don't need people just riding clocks, and so being able to evaluate, performance is critically important. Honesty in that performance evaluation is key. In my career, I've seen a lot of performance evaluations, annual evaluations, just pencil whipped, just to give a 3.5, 5.5, whatever the number is, percentage raise because that's what was budgeted. You're not really helping yourself. You're not helping your company, and you certainly are not helping to further the capabilities of the individual that you're supposed to be properly evaluating. Many times, the people that were, I would hate to say on the chopping block, but in jeopardy from a position perspective, they were just in the wrong seat. And if you don't spend the honest time evaluating the right seat for that person, you're not doing the company or the person any justice. And I've got a number of examples, but one that I'll share with you was a lady that came to us from a sales background. She was in owner relations for a couple of years, struggling horribly, and was really not happy. And she wasn't creating great experiences for owners or herself. We used her sales background, put her in a BD role, and she flourished. And she ended up being the #1 new property acquirer of our entire BD team. We just had her in the wrong spot. And had I just whipped out the 3.5 or whatever percent, 5.5% increase every year, and no, you're doing great, we would both have failed.
And ultimately, like, I think you touched on it there, Lino, the employee is typically a lot happier when they're in the right seat. Brooke, that came up more than once kind of during this process. I'm curious your perspective on this one as well.
Yeah, no, we heard it all the time. Like, very often you have great employees. Well, we've seen time and time again, people are getting ready to get fired potentially because they're not performing well. And then when we actually dig in and see their psychometric personality assessment, tool, you realize you're like, no wonder they're in the total wrong seat. And then they move them over to the right role, and they just absolutely flourish. So we've seen that time and time again. And it's one part just to get the right people on the bus, but you got to get them into that right seat.
Absolutely. So number 9 here kind of touches on the previous kind of team building aspect of things. You say not original, but hire slow, fire fast. The right people will accelerate your business. The wrong ones will poison it. So ultimately, we can try to put people in the right seat, right, Lino? And in some cases, it just doesn't work out. So how do you kind of go through the process of making that call? Okay, this person is the wrong person, and then moving on from them when you do need to let someone go?
Yeah, so there's really 2 sides of this for me. One of them is, and I would always, with my senior leadership team, I would challenge them when they came to me and said, look, I need more people. I need another FTE. And I would push back and say, is the payroll that you currently have at your disposal the highest and best use? And you'd have to go evaluate your teams to make sure that what we're spending today is the right spend and the right balance and the like. And so you can get the right people, you can get them in the right seat, but maybe they're not a good fit for your culture. maybe they're a great person, but they're they don't fit with your company culture. Those people can really do some serious damage in a short window. And so I'd say you got to go even further than the right seat and the training. You've got to be aware of how they are fitting into that business structure that you have. It's not a set it and forget it. You got to stay directly connected.
Mm-hmm. And Brooke, we've talked a lot about team, and ultimately we want people to have a long, happy career with the company. Sometimes that's not just in the cards, and sometimes you have to let people go. And usually once you do that, I think we talked about this last recording, 36 hours of pain, and then you can move on. Right. So yeah, you just kind of have to learn the skill. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess on both sides of this. So you have the hiring side and then you also have the firing side. So like from, I think Sarah Bradford said, hiring employees without really vetting them was one of the mistakes she made, and not having like an organized training program and not regularly checking in with them. And one of my favorite, thought leaders that I follow is Sam Altman, co-founder at OpenAI and the former president of Y Combinator. He always talks about hiring for values first, aptitude second, and skills third. But on the firing side, I think Jason Sprinkle nailed it. He said, look, it's never easy. And he was awful at it. He's a people pleaser like you, Lino, and he wanted someone to understand the full context to why they're being fired. So he always began with this like long, deep explanation. And then he learned from his Ashley, his COO, to start with, look, we've decided to let you go right out of the gates. And it's still obviously something that no one wants to hear, but it was vastly better approach. And he's never done another way ever since. And I think even Mike Harrington echoed kind of the same thing. He's like, I think he said, I hate this part of the job. I'm not a great people manager, but sometimes this has to be done. And it's not about you. It's about the entire team that a bad hire can affect.
Yeah. And you can do that with dignity and respect.
Yeah, 100%.
And when you can actually sense some relief from that employee. Very rarely is it a surprise.
Yeah.
They know, and so no, that's but they should still leave with a sense of respect.
There's a great podcast, and I'll share it with you, Conrad. We can put it in the notes, but it was actually, and I actually keep a reference of this, and anytime I have to fire someone, I actually listen to it. So it's actually Sam Altman, and it's just someone was interviewing him, and they asked him like, how do you fire people? And that's exactly what he said. He's like, look, you can do it with dignity, you can do it with respect, make it seem like a win for them. And there's a way that you can get them ultimately, like they're not in the right role. They're not happy either, usually is the case. So you want to kind of help them find that spot. Yes, it does suck for 36 hours, but in the end, you're actually doing them a favor. And I'll share that link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be good. I know that so a lot of tech companies have done layoffs in the past 12 months, and one thing I've seen is you can tell kind of I feel like the ethics and the integrity of the company by how they do it. I think it was Shopify who had to lay off people, and they like gave them the machines that they had bought for them. Hey, you can keep that. They helped them with career counseling. They gave them severance or any shares that were vested. They gave them to them. They didn't make them wait, out any vesting period. And they treated people the right way. I'm sure obviously it wasn't fun to get fired from Shopify. You probably wanted to keep working there in many cases, but when you had to do it, they did it in the best way possible. And then people were like, yeah, I would work for Shopify because if they had to let me go, at least I know they treat me decently on the way out. Other companies took the opposite tact, and they kind of got criticized for that, as they probably should have. When you have a lot of money on the balance sheet, now we're mostly dealing with small companies, you don't have the same resources, but like you guys were saying, I still think there's a way to do that in a more fair way where the person feels okay as they're walking out the door, at least.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I like this one. Number 10. I don't think we have this one anywhere else. So Lino, this is a fantastic one to end on. Don't take yourself too seriously. After all, you are selling vacations, for heaven's sake. So I would love to hear your perspective here. How do we kind of have some fun along the way as we go through this crazy world that is vacation rentals?
You think about it, we're in the hospitality business, man. If we can't have fun selling vacations and enjoying our guests and experiences, good, bad, and ugly, then we really all should be doing something else. But look, vacations are a fun business. We all know what we expect when we go on vacation, and one of the things we don't want is to really deal with staff, right? We want things to be clean and consistent and exciting, and all the amenities that we want to choose when we're on vacation. But when you have, and I'll go back to that Chick-fil-A, deal, is that you walk into or Publix, we have Publix grocery stores down here in Florida, and you run into a staff member, they are genuinely happy to serve. and they don't just tell you what aisle coffee's on, they walk you to the aisle, and the like. And too many times in the hospitality industry, you got stiff, jackets behind front desk, and everybody else is walking up in bathing suits, right? It's like that to me is a mix match right off the bat. And so allowing your people to surprise and delight guests and do things, that's kind of one of the metrics that Chick-fil-A really does extremely well, is that, you don't have to ask the boss to take great care of a customer. And to me, everyone on your team, from the newest housekeeper to the most seasoned manager, should be thinking about the guest more than their own job. Because without that guest, you don't really have as much to do, or that job might not be as necessary.
Yeah. I like this one, Brooke, because like I said, it didn't exactly come up before. So I think this is a lovely one to end on. And ultimately, that's what we should be focused on too.
No, this was great. And I think, Lino, this was at the very end. It wasn't the last line in the book, but it was very close to it. And I loved it. As soon as I read it, I wanted to put it towards the end just because it was a good kind of exclamation point. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, I believe we're in the best industry in the world. I mean, I absolutely love this industry, and it's fun what we do. And obviously there's some challenges and things like that, but it's pretty good. So yeah, that entire conclusion kind of chapter was based around this. And I think Tony Capert kind of summed it really well. And he says, make sure you take time, celebrate the wins, and have fun. So it's a good way to end it.
Right. Absolutely. I think, Brooke, you've got one more for Lino before we let him go here.
Yeah. So, Lino, if you could go back and give your 25-year-old self any advice, what would it be?
Man, oh gosh, what would I tell that knucklehead? Holy cow! I would probably say figure out a better work-life balance. You don't have to conquer the world in a week. Some calls, emails, even meetings really can wait till Monday, and your family deserves that. So I would say work-life balance early on. I'd really like to tell that dude.
Oh, that's great. Awesome. Anything else, Brooke or Lino, we should say before we end it, or is that a good way for us to put a bow on this one?
I think that's a perfect way to end it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lino. We really do appreciate you coming on and sharing kind of your mistakes with us. I guarantee you, someone who's listening is going to benefit tremendously from listening to what you have to say. So we do thank you. And we could put the links, next to this video or show or whatever the case may be, where people can check out all you're doing, not just Scenic Stays, but the other companies as well. So we thank you for your time. And then Brooke and I will catch you on the next one.
My pleasure. Really appreciate you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.